Now let's get into the actual details of Stoic philosophy and what, as a Stoic, you should be looking at, believing and accepting. And we're going to start by looking at the first two of the tripartite theories of early Stoicism, and that's specifically looking at physics and logic within Stoicism. So in general, in this introduction, we're going to have a look at the tripartite connection, and then we're going to take in both of these different theories of the tripartite connection and have a look at them individually. So we're going to look at what how the three branches of Stoicism almost connect with each other, and then we're going to have a look at logic and then physics individually. So as an introduction, a fundamental aspect of Stoic philosophy is the twofold idea that ethics is central and that studying ethics requires the study of physics and the study of logic. So really, when we look at the Stoic understanding of physics and logic, we're using our knowledge of physics and logic to prop up our understanding and our study of ethics. As a collective, these are the tripartite theory of Stoicism. And what we're going to look at, what we're going to do is look closely at the connections between the three of these aspects before we look at logic and physics specifically. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at ethics. So when it comes to the tripartite connection, Stoicism is and was fundamentally a practical philosophy. The main aim of the Stoic philosophy was to help people live a eudaimonic life, a life that's worth living, a good life. And the Stoics believed that this eudaimonic life came in the form of practicing so-called cardinal values. And the ethics of Stoicism is then supported by the study of the other two fields, logic and, that should say physics, but logic and physics. This is all philosophy, but okay. Logic in this context is a lot more expansive than our traditional and modern meaning of the term. The Stoic logic includes the modern day study of epistemology as well as the modern day study of logic. It also studied what could be called psychology or cognitive science, but that's sort of here nor there because that's a different part of Stoicism anyway, and that really links more into Stoic ethics. So physics, on the other hand, was a lot more like the one we would call modern day physics. So logic incorporated epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, when it comes to the Stoics, but physics was a lot more like modern day physics. So it included the study of the natural world, like as physics does today, the study of the natural sciences, as well as incorporating metaphysics into the study as well. Metaphysics is so in modern philosophy, we would call metaphysics the sort of study of reality almost. So the study of what exists, the study of time, the study of if things are real, the study of persistence, causality, free will. These are the kind of things that you study in metaphysics. The study of mind, what it means to have a mind. These are all metaphysical things. We can effectively suggest that Stoic understanding of logic is the study of how we reason about the world, and that the study of physics is the study of studying that world specifically. So we study the world specifically using physics, and then we reason about that using logic. So we looked at how these two relate together. How do they relate to ethics? Well, there is a relation between ethics and logic and physics because it can be said that Stoicism is a naturalistic philosophy. When we speak of God and the soul, when we talk about Stoic philosophy, what we're doing is referring to physics, to physical entities. So the way we understand the relation between the three is that physics is being used to explain and formulate our ethical principles in Stoicism, and that it's all kept together using logic. That's fundamentally what we're talking about. So let's look at Stoic logic specifically. Okay, so the Stoics did make a number of improvements to logic. And by this, like I say, I mean they made contributions to epistemology, what we would call epistemology today, and also to the formal logic that we would call formal logic today. It's just that Stoics thought that these two were the same thing, which they're not, okay? So when it came to epistemology, the Stoics were very heavy on the notion that cognitive progress was important. Our cognitive understanding and learning was an important thing. And this was known as a prokope in the Greek terms, okay? And this means one is making epistemological progress, effectively. Our modern understanding of it. They would probably say logical progress. When it came to the kind of epistemological perception, like how we perceive things, the Stoics did believe that people can see things that are not there, so they can get things wrong when it comes to their perception. And they did specifically cite things like hallucinations and dreams as examples of one's so-called phantasma. Okay, these individual perceptions that were actually wrong. So, if you're wondering why Aristotle's there, we'll talk about that in a minute. We can describe Stoic epistemology as inherently empiricist. Okay, so we would call empiricism in today's understanding. So when it comes to what we would describe as formal logic, the Stoics made a number of important contributions. I will just also say, when I say empiricism, what I mean by empiricism is taking things that can be proven with empirical evidence to be true. So that's a very oversimplification, but as a general idea, that's what empiricism means. So when it comes to formal logic, they recognise that not all valid arguments are what we call syllogisms. So a syllogism is basically an instance of a form of reasoning in which a conclusion is drawn from two propositions. So I'm going to give an example of a syllogism, and we're going to talk about why the Stoics believe that not all valid arguments are syllogisms, like what Aristotle said. So if we take this philosophical argument right here, so we've got two premises, which are propositions that are either true or false, and we almost add them together to come up with a conclusion, okay? And when we say an argument is valid, that means that the premises come together and they lead to the conclusion. They entail from the conclusion. So this one is a valid argument, and we know this because if we look at it, okay, premise 1, all men are bold. Premise 2, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is bold. This is what's known as a syllogism, because what it does is the first premise is an all-encompassing premise. Okay, it suggests that all of something has this property. So in this case, it's all men are bold. Okay, they all have the property of being bold. Therefore, if Socrates is also a man, then Socrates has to be bold because all men are bold and Socrates is a man. Okay, you should see that this makes logical sense. This is a valid argument, and it's what's known as a syllogism. But the Stoics believe that there can be valid arguments that are not syllogisms, and this is a true thing. This is true. Not all syllogisms are valid, but not all valid arguments are syllogisms. So Stoic syllogistics was built on the five basic terms of syllogisms, and that's what the Stoics developed and added into formal logic. And it's really important that really it doesn't sound like a lot, but the idea that not all valid arguments are syllogisms is very important to our understanding of philosophy today, because most of the time in philosophy we don't deal with simple syllogistic kinds of arguments. We deal with a lot more complicated ones. So, as another thing, the Stoic logic has been described as a kind of propositional logic, which is what we would describe as today. And propositional logic is the idea that we have different propositions, so something that is true or false, like a sentence. So, for example, this man has hair, okay, or a man has hair, or John has hair, anything like that. These are propositions, and that we can add them together, multiple propositions with lots of different connectives. So you can have a conjunction. So you could say John has hair and John is tall. That is a a sentence in propositional logic. We have two propositions. John has hair, which we could say proposition. We could call that P, and you could say, and John is tall. So that's Q. So P and Q together. John has hair and John is tall. Okay, I'm going to do a course on propositional logic anyway. I think that'll probably be next week's course, but as an idea, that's what we can do. You take propositions that are just simple P's and Q's and R's, okay, and we add them together using different connectives to form different sentences, and that's what propositional logic is. One major difference between Stoic logic and the sort of modern formal logic is that the purpose of Stoic logic was to complement ethics. The purpose of logic in modern day formal logic is a number of things. There are a number of reasons. There are a myriad of reasons that we would study logic, from computer science to physics to quantum physics to just working out philosophy itself. So for this reason, the Stoics were more concerned with the validity of arguments rather than logical truths. They didn't really care about if something was logically true. By logically true, I mean true by definition. So something has to be true because of the logic. The Stoics didn't really care that much about that. They cared more about making sure that arguments were valid, and especially ethical arguments were valid. And they also interestingly took into account what we call modality in logic. So modality is there are different kinds of modalities within logic, and generally they can be best described as principles like something is necessarily true, it's possibly true, it's impossible for something to be true, or it's probable for something to be true. And that's why we've got this image here. These are examples of modal logic. Okay, we'll do modal logic as well. This is going a little bit beyond the sort of understanding of Stoicism, but these are examples of modal logic. But it's interesting that the Stoics were quite advanced in their understanding of logic by implementing different kinds of modal properties as well, looking at discussing the logic of things that are impossible or possible or probable. When it comes to Stoic physics, it's a little bit easier to understand. So according to Stoicism, physics includes what we would call today natural science. So the natural sciences, like modern day physics basically, metaphysics, which I've already mentioned and discussed, and also theology. Especially under people like Marcus Aurelius, he believed a lot that Stoicism should really be focusing a lot on the kind of theological issues. When it comes to the natural sciences, the Stoics thought that we should, quote, live according to nature. Because we need to live according to nature, it's very important that we understand to the best of our ability what that nature is. So the Stoic believed that everything that was real in nature was also corporeal. Okay, this means basically linking and relating to the body. Okay, and they also believed that this included more metaphysical concepts like God or the soul or the concept of spirit. These were also corporeal theories. And the Stoics, finally, they also embraced what we call a vitalist theory of nature. So vitalism, really, this is what the Stoic understanding of vitalism is. They identified two main natural principles within physics, and this is the active and the passive. The active principle is so-called ungenerated and indestructible, and it's closely linked with things like God and reason, and it's referred to as logos. So, if something is active within physics, according to Stoicism, it means that they are ungenerated, they are indestructible. So, for example, God would be an example of an active property, an active principle. A passive principle is destroyed and created as part of the overarching Stoic cosmology, and this is linked closely with the classical elements, the four classical elements of water, fire, earth, and air. So these are things that are ever changing and always being destroyed and recreated. So these are the two main principles within the sort of the theory of Stoic physics. The idea that we've got things that are indestructible like God, and we've got things that are ever changing and destroyed and recreated all the time like water, fire, earth and air. It's also important to note that the Stoic understanding of God is quite interesting as well. They rejected the Aristotelian idea of a prime mover. So Aristotle believed that Aristotle obviously didn't believe in the kind of Christian God that we have today, but he did believe in the idea of a prime mover, that everything has a cause and effect. So if I was to push my phone across the desk, the phone moving is caused by my pushing. So everything has a cause and effect, but that this cause and effect isn't infinite. It doesn't go on forever. At the very, very start, there is something called a prime mover. Okay, it isn't a kind of God that has any kind of qualities. All it is something that started this train of cause and effect. That's what Aristotle believed about the prime mover. The Stoics rejected this, okay, but they also didn't accept the idea of a sort of Judeo-Christian understanding of God, since they believed that God was immanent rather than some omnipotent being outside of time and space. There are some Christians that believe that God is also immanent and transcendent at the same time, so with us all at the same time, as well as above us outside time and space, but these are kind of contradictory terms. When it comes to Stoic metaphysics, the Stoics can be described as so-called metaphysical determinists. This is effectively the view that there is no free will and everything is determined. Because they've believed in this web of cause and effect, okay, they believe that every single effect has a cause, and that by that there is no actual free will in anything, because everything is already determined. That's what their view of metaphysics really comes down to. We understand this because of Cicero, and he describes Stoic metaphysics as so, and I'm going to read this out in its entirety. So, the Stoics say that it is impossible, when all the circumstances surrounding both the cause and that of which it is a cause are the same, that things should not turn out a certain way on one occasion, but that they should turn out that way on some other occasion. Okay, so this is a very complicated quote from De Fato by Cicero. But what we would describe today as a metaphysical determinist is something that the Stoics would naturally agree with and adopt. Okay, so as a summary of the sort of Stoic logic and Stoic physics, the Stoics made a number of formal improvements to formal logic and epistemology. Stoic syllogistics were based on 5 basic syllogisms. Stoic physics includes the study of the natural sciences, metaphysics, and what we would call theology. And they adopted a vitalist conception of the natural world, the idea of an active and a passive, the active being indestructible and the passive being ever-changing. And that Stoic metaphysics is determinist. These are the things that you need to know. I know this got very complicated and into a lot of quite high level philosophical stuff, but in general this is what we need to know about Stoic logic and Stoic physics. The Stoics were very difficult to pin down because their theories spread across hundreds and hundreds of years, so it's quite hard to really find exactly what they all believed. But this is really what we can draw from from our understanding of Stoicism. In the next lesson, we're going to look at a nice and easy part of the tripartite, which was Stoic ethics, and how one should live their life according to Stoicism.